Paper Bag Series. I am with your co-host, Mr. Kola Adetola.
Thank you. I'm here with your host, Mr. Brandon Lewis.
This is Desmond Hardy with another installation of For Your Ears Only, and today I want to talk about something that has been taking the internet by storm recently, and that is none other than the conversation around Bruno Mars and cultural appropriation. It's kind of interesting that we live in a day and age where a person who is considered non-white could ever be accused or thought of as culturally appropriating. But apparently these are the times that we're living in. And in the social media world, in Black Twitter, people have taken sides very quickly. And there have been a lot of black folks that have jumped and run to Bruno Mars' defense to say there is no way, shape, or form that Bruno is ever in any danger of culturally appropriating. And then there are some brothers and sisters who are a little bit more conscious, who are saying, yeah, we might want to question that a little bit more. And I actually want to take a step back and look at this a little bit more critically rather than just throwing the label out there, because I think we live in a day and age right now where just the thought of a label can get people up in their feelings a little bit. So I want to back up a little bit and understand something. When we talk about cultural appropriation, I think it's best or more it's more utilitarian to look at it in terms of a spectrum of problematic behaviors or thoughts or privileges. And what I mean by that is there is the very problematic end of people who are quote unquote culture vultures, like a Miley Cyrus or a Justin Timberlake or a Post Malone or an Iggy Azalea, who can somewhat put on this coat of blackness, that they can put on this dialect, this accent, this tone, this hairstyle, this way of singing that makes them wear blackness and black culture, and they use that to ride this wave of popularity. And as soon as they've reached this critical mass of fanhood, then they can cast it off like it's an old toy that they no longer want to play with. I think that's a much more pernicious form of cultural appropriation that we should and must call out and be careful about in terms of allowing access to our craft and our culture. But I think there's another end of that spectrum, which is the more passive end that doesn't require malice, which is really the end that requires just the benefit of privilege. And I think that's the end that Bruno is on, which is benefiting off of the fact that we as a society, we're living in a day and time where people and Americans want to consume black culture from non-black faces. So we live in a day and time where a Macklemore can get more Grammys than a Tupac and a Biggie. We live in a day and time where Adele can get more Grammys than Beyonce. And she actually has to get on stage and say, what does Beyonce have to do to win an Album of the Year award? We live in a day and time where somebody like a Bruno Mars can hit number 1 or top 10 hits for music that, quite frankly, Kool and the Gang and the Gap Band would have ran off the charts back in the 80s. And it's not to say that Bruno doesn't make great music. Bruno makes music that everybody wants to bounce to. I mean, I don't care who you are, what demographic you come from, how old you are, what your education level is. When 24 Karat Magic comes on, you start bouncing, and your grandmama starts bouncing, and your baby start bouncing. So that's not the issue. Bruno makes great music. Bruno actually also, he gives and pays homage to the people who have influenced him and who have played an early influence on him musically coming up. Remember, this is the same guy who wrote CeeLo's F.U. So this guy has been inculcated into black culture and black music for a very long time. However, I still think and I still believe that he's the recipient of certain privileges that a black person necessarily wouldn't be. So we haven't seen a black person come up with the same level of popularity in such a short amount of time for the same type of music that a Bruno Mars is coming up with. That doesn't make him a culture vulture. That says, hey, Bruno is riding a wave that he has no control over, but he is a beneficiary of, which is the privilege of being so popular and winning these types of awards. There's definitely a critical argument that can be made about whether or not he had the Album of the Year over a Jay-Z or other people. And I think that's important to have that conversation. But I think we don't need to get too hard on policing the culture, because if we do that, then we have people like the Beastie Boys. We have people like Tina Marie, Bobby Caldwell, Michael McDonald. They wouldn't contribute anything to what's quote unquote a traditional black music as well. And we all know that they have done so, and they've honored the legacy of black music and the culture as well. So even though we have as many examples of culture vultures, we do have examples of white people and non-white people and non-black people who've done honor and a service to the black genres as well. And I think it's important for us to continuously be engaged in these conversations to make sure that the public is aware of where the pulse of black culture comes from, but also be cognizant of paying homage to where it started, who originated it, and also the fact that if it were not for black people having a pulse on what's cool and what's hip and what's popular, then what's popular would never be a moneymaker in society today. So that's my take, and I want to hear yours. So this is your weekly installment of For Your Ears Only. Want to hear what you have to say. Thank you.